Hi, this is Grandma Lorie with Moses and the 10 Plagues of Egypt. Prince Moses had escaped from Egypt and had spent many years in Midian tending sheep. One day he was called by God from a burning bush on a high mountain. God made Moses a prophet and commanded Moses to go back to Egypt to free the people of the house of Israel. So Moses left the land of Midian with his wife and 2 sons. On their way, they met Moses' brother Aaron walking toward them. The 2 brothers hugged in joy. Aaron told Moses the Lord had spoken to him the week before and commanded him to set out and find Moses. They agreed that Aaron should be the official spokesman for Moses because Aaron was a great speaker and would bring prestige to Moses. All kings had spokesmen to show they had power to do official business. As soon as Moses and Aaron arrived in Egypt, they gathered the elders of Israel. They told the elders the Lord was going to get them all out of slavery and out of Egypt in miraculous ways. They told the elders they had been sent by the God called I Am. That proved to the elders that Moses and Aaron had been sent by God. The elders were so glad they bowed down and almost worshiped Moses and Aaron. Finally, at last, it was time for the 2 prophets to meet this new Pharaoh. Ever since he was young, Moses had not been a smooth speaker. This was one reason why Aaron was to speak for Moses. But Moses always told Aaron what he should say. At first, the brothers did not tell Pharaoh he must let their people go free, never to return. Instead, Aaron said, "Our God, the God of Israel, has told us to take all of our people on a 3-day journey off into the wilderness where we will worship our God. Our God sends this message to you, Pharaoh. Let my people go, that they may serve me." But Pharaoh was very angry. "What do you mean? You ask me to take your people away from the work they do for me? I own them. It must be that they don't have enough work to keep them busy, but I will show them work. I will give them more work to do." Pharaoh rose from his throne and spoke loudly. "For centuries, my slaves have made bricks to build monuments and cities for me." Pharaoh smiled wickedly and said, "So now let them make just as many bricks as before, but I will give them no straw to make bricks. The Israelites must go find their own straw for the brick making." You see, building clay will not stay in one solid piece, like a brick, unless strands of straw go all through the clay to hold it together. So brickmakers did have to have straw. But finding straw made their task so much harder. The Hebrews had to take extra time at night to go cut down straw and chop it into short pieces. Then, when the Hebrews couldn't keep up with the brickmaking, the Egyptians beat them cruelly. Many of the Israelites were furious with Moses and Aaron, for now they had to work twice as hard. They said, "May the Lord God judge you and punish you, Moses. You promised to lead us out and set us free, but you have only made our suffering the greater." So Moses cried to the Lord, and the Lord said to him, "Take Aaron your brother and go again to Pharaoh. Show him the signs with your rod that I gave you in the mountain." So they went in to Pharaoh and again asked him in the Lord's name to let their people go. Pharaoh said, "Who is this Lord? Why should I obey his commands? Show me a sign to prove that a God has sent you." So Aaron threw down the rod of Moses, and it turned into a massive snake. Everyone gasped and jumped back. But there were magicians in the court who had a similar trick. They threw down their rods, and their rods became snakes too. How did they do that? With them, it was a trick, not a miracle from any god. But Moses' rod, still in the form of a snake, ran after the other snakes and swallowed them up. Then Aaron picked up the snake, and it turned back into a staff again. Pharaoh was not impressed.
So, you both know tricks with snakes, but still I will not let your people go.
That night, God told Moses what to do next.
When Pharaoh comes down to the water to make an offering to his stone god, you will step out of the bulrushes. Then you must take the rod and wave it over the waters of Egypt, over the Nile River and the canals and the lakes.
Moses and Aaron did as they were told. Aaron struck the water with Moses' rod right in front of Pharaoh, and in a moment the water turned to blood. So did all the canals and the streams and the ponds and the fountains all over Egypt. All the fish in the waters died, and a terrible stink of rotting fish rose over the land. The people and the animals could not live without water. They would die. But in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites all lived, the water remained pure and was not turned to blood. Everyone in Egypt was freaked out and horrified. This was not something their magicians could do. The people of Egypt had to dig wells to find clean water, or force their slaves to dig wells. But Pharaoh could not rule in his glory without 1,000,000 slaves to work for him, so he still would not let the people of Israel go. After 7 days, Moses took away the plague of blood, but he warned Pharaoh that another plague would come if he refused to let the Hebrews go. The Pharaoh yelled,
"No, I will not be ruled by your God, and I will not let your people go."
So in 7 more days, Aaron stretched forth Moses' rod over the waters of Egypt, and suddenly hundreds of thousands of frogs came slipping and sliming and hopping out of the Nile River. They hopped and crawled to cover the land, into the houses, all over the floor, into the beds, and into the food. They crawled into cupboards and ovens and closets. They jumped on people while they slept and plopped into their food as the Egyptians ate. They were all over the palace, all over the city. Like a great army, they ran over the fields. But there were no frogs in Goshen, the land of the Hebrews. The frogs drove Pharaoh wild. He called Moses and said,
"Pray to your God for me. Ask him to take the frogs away, and I will let your people go."
Aaron looked straight at the Pharaoh and said,
"Then you must choose the exact day the frogs will die. That will prove it was no accident that the frogs died on the very exact day you chose." Pharaoh roared, "Tomorrow!" and stomped his sandal in fury, squashing another frog under it. So Moses prayed, and God took away the frogs. But they didn't just vanish. No, they died wherever they were, which was everywhere. The Egyptians scooped them out of their beds and their kitchens and their houses and heaped them up and burned them or buried them. Ugh, what a stink! 1,000,000 dead frogs rotting everywhere. Pharaoh was so relieved to see the frogs gone, he decided, "Ha! No more frogs! I will not let the Hebrews go!"
So then, at God's command, Moses and Aaron stood right before Moses. Aaron said,
"If you will break your promise to God, he will give you a new plague."
He lifted Moses' rod again and struck the dust. Everywhere the dust became alive with lice and fleas. The lice and fleas were a worse plague than the frogs, biting and itching all over every Egyptian body, getting into their hair and clothes and food, but Pharaoh would still not obey the Lord. So God sent great swarms and clouds of biting flies all over the land, so that the Egyptian houses and beds and foods were covered with flies, and the sky was black with more clouds of flies. But miraculously, in Goshen, there were no lice, no fleas, no flies. Pharaoh began to soften a little. He said,
"Why must you go out of the land to worship your God? Worship him here inside of Egypt."
Aaron replied,
"When we worship the Lord, we must make an offering of the animals which your people of Egypt worship, oxen and sheep. It would make the Egyptians angry to see us offering a sacrifice of animals which they call gods."
Pharaoh said, slapping a fly on his arm.
Well, you may go, but do not go very far and come back soon.
But as soon as Moses and Aaron had taken away the flies, Pharaoh's heart hardened once more, and he broke his promise again, and still kept God's people slaving over bricks and fields and every other kind of work the Egyptians didn't want to do themselves. Now, here's something you must know. If you read this story in the Bible, it always says that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. But in the true translation of the Bible, God makes it very clear that Pharaoh hardened his own heart. God would never work against his own people. Pharaoh was rock-hard stubborn when it came to losing his 2 million slaves. Those slaves were his wealth. What would a king be without wealth? Who would build the glory of Egypt if he didn't have slaves? Now, we don't know if it was really 2 million slaves. Some scholars say that counting women and children, it might have been 5 million. Either way, that was a lot of slaves. So when Pharaoh again broke his promise to God about the flies, Aaron warned him of another plague that would come the very next day. It would be a terrible sickness and disease to sicken all of the animals in Egypt. Aaron finished,
"So you cannot say you were not warned, Pharaoh."
Sure enough, the next day, horses and donkeys, camels and sheep, oxen and goats died by the thousands in one day all over the land. But no plague came upon the flocks and herds of the Israelites. How could Pharaoh still be so stubborn? He was warned, but he refused to listen and obey God's words. God told Moses to go right in front of Pharaoh, take up a handful of ashes from his fire pit, and throw it into the air like a cloud. The wind blew it from the palace all over the land. Wherever the soot and ash particles landed, instant boils began to break out on people and any animals left, including Pharaoh himself. And wow, do boils hurt. It happened everywhere, except in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived. Still, Pharaoh refused to obey God. Once more, giving Pharaoh fair warning, Aaron warned him that the worst hailstorm that had ever happened in Egypt since the creation of the world would come on them. Pharaoh exclaimed,
"What is this hail, that my people should fear it?"
Pharaoh did not believe it because Egypt had almost never had rain and had never, ever before had hail. But a lot of his officials did believe Moses and put every person, animal, and valued thing inside buildings for protection. Moses stretched up his rod to the sky. At once, a terrible storm of lightning and hail burst forth upon the land. The black clouds rolled, the thunder crashed, lightning flashed, and hail pounded down. They had never seen hail. Most of them had never seen ice in any form. Giant hailstones, big as snowballs, crushed all the crops growing in the fields and the fruits on the trees, destroying them. People and animals who did not take cover were hit and killed as if by bullets from above. Now Pharaoh got really scared. His animals had been killed in a plague. Now all his crops were smashed. What would anyone eat? They were doomed. Pharaoh cried out, almost weeping,
"All right, you win. I will let your people go."
Moses prayed, and God took away the hail. But what do you expect? Pharaoh broke his promise again and would not let the Israelites leave the land. So God sent great clouds of locusts, which ate up every green thing the hail had spared. And after the locusts came a plague of darkness. For 3 days, the dark was so thick, no one could see the sun shining, no moon, no stars. But still Pharaoh would not let the people go. Pharaoh yelled at Moses,
"You've ruined my land. Get out of my sight. Let me never see your face again. If you come into my presence, you shall be instantly killed."
Moses replied through Aaron,
"It shall be as you say, Pharaoh. We will see your face no more, but there shall be one plague left, and then Pharaoh will be glad to let the people go. The firstborn of every man and every animal shall die."
Then Moses and Aaron left and never saw Pharaoh again. Right away, Moses and Aaron went to the Hebrews in the land of Goshen and gave them 2 orders.
"First, make your people ready to leave Egypt tomorrow. Pack everything. Bring carts and wagons to carry your loads, and ask your neighbors for their valuable gold, silver, and precious things. They will be in such great sorrow, they will not deny you. Their gold will be your payment for the work you have done for Egypt for the last 400 years. Our time here will end tomorrow."
Could it be true? The Israelites were full of joy. But then Aaron said,
"But the second thing, tonight you must prepare a special sort of feast. You must sacrifice a perfect boy lamb to the Lord. You must eat its meat roasted, but take its blood and smear it on the wooden doorframe of your houses. Do not leave your houses at all during the night."
Aaron went on to tell them why.
"Tonight the destroying angel will come, and every doorway that is not protected by the blood of the lamb, the angel will enter in. He will slay the firstborn son of every family, from the Pharaoh down to the dirtiest slave. God will also kill the firstborn of every animal. And every year after this night, all of Israel must celebrate this same feast and call it the Feast of the Passover. For the angel of God will pass over your house and spare you."
As the Hebrews rushed to pack their belongings and cook the special food, midnight crept closer. At the stroke of midnight, every firstborn son in every house was struck dead. Suddenly, there was screaming, weeping, wailing throughout the land, except within the houses of the Hebrews, who had smeared blood around their doorways. In the royal throne room, the person most devastated by this invasion of death was the Pharaoh himself. He had only one son whom he dearly loved. The boy lay dead in his arms. Now Pharaoh had nothing. Crops dead, animals dead, the land ravaged by hail, and now this horrible sorrow. By morning, he could see his entire workforce of uncountable slaves flocking together to leave the land, already lined up in their millions, singing as they walked and rode and danced toward the rising sun in the east. There was nothing left for Pharaoh. He slumped on his golden throne, his dead son in his lap. He knew he might as well be dead too. No wealth, only grief. But the joyful Israelites, with their families, flocks, herds, and tools, and all their possessions, marched out of the land of Egypt. That's the end of this part of the great escape, but not the end of the story of Moses. Join me again next time for another group of amazing miracles to escape Egypt.